So while Sharon gets the requisite wireless piece that adds to the microphone itself, of course you know Sharon and you know Joss, but I'm also really pleased to reintroduce Georgie Birks, who introduced the session yesterday, and Ekta Nathu, who has joined us all the way from New Zealand. And my job here is to really get out of the way, which is a great thing because I'm completely shattered by about now, and ask these wonderful women to reflect on what the last couple of days have been like. What have you learned? What do you want to take away? What do you think we should be doing next?
I have learnt so much over the past 2 days. It's almost overwhelming, but I think it's more exciting. Just like you were talking about Joss before, that was something that was a real wake-up call. I feel in my heart that my practice doesn't do that, and we do the standard that's required, but there is a creativity waiting to be opened. And similarly with Simona's talk, that was a real eye-opener too. But then realising how far we've come, but how much more there still is to do, which I guess touched on what Sharon was talking about, how amazing the 1970s were and what the women were doing there and what everybody's doing now. And I'm really excited for the future, and I think that there's change happening. There was change happening, and there's still going to be change, and it's exciting.
It's incredibly exciting, and I think the word overwhelming definitely comes to mind. This past 2 days has just been extraordinary to hear the work that so many people have been doing across the world, and to have us all in the same room to share these stories, to share the progress that has been made is phenomenal. So I thank you all who have shared over the past 2 days. But I do agree that you can't help but reflect. I mean, I'm still a student, so I go back to school and I kind of reflect on what it is that we have been taught and what we are being taught and the curriculums that we're faced with. And of course, I mean, the discussion earlier today during the talk about the history, it's there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. But I have to ask the question about where you all stand on how we should be, whether we should be aiming to make these sorts of discussions open to a wider audience, open to every student in our school. We are talking about issues and ways of looking at design and this profession that so many people in this room are familiar with in one way or another, or interested in at least. And I want to ask you both your position on that, how, specifically within education and our curriculum, how do we get everybody interested? How do we expand this conversation to the people who aren't in the room?
No, go ahead. Not preaching to the choir.
I mean, I think I've got two kind of interlocking responses. One is we've had quite a lot of discussions about what other things have changed. So both when I was at architecture school and through Matrix, it was at a time when London was actually very decrepit and there was lots of empty properties and it was very cheap to live there. And I happened to be studying, there was a lot of community action already happening. So a lot of the architecture students got involved in that just because it was literally on our doorstep. And it was very easy to do things like squat, which we did as a kind of political action. But we didn't, I got a grant. I got paid to go to university. And I had to work as well because I couldn't, my family didn't have any money, but that was fine. And so the kind of wriggle room was much bigger, I think. I mean, there's so much going on at the moment. It feels like there is a lot of energy and people are they're carving out those opportunities in the current circumstance. But So for me, it is. I know there was a comment about whether you ask students to, take the load or not. But certainly a lot of what was happening when we were students is students just formed their own studios and they got their own teachers in, and they just kind of refused what they were being offered.
Activists.
And I do think that, especially with things like Extinction Rebellion, whether it's around gender or around wider issues, that sense of just seeing where education is really falling behind the things that really matter. It's kind of and it is, again, I take your point about that, but it is a moment when, because often some of these things are much harder to do once you're in practice, because then you've also got to earn an income, a living. I feel like, the possibilities of resistance across from small to wide scale are really, and a lot of the tools are there. The tools that people have come up with today. There are tools like only using women references, that Harriet Harris has done again. There's kind of stuff going on in Stockholm where they have a whole, they do teach gender as part of it because it's grown out of a kind of campaign from students. So,
I think it's okay to preach to the choir, to get your story together. And so I would, there was a question earlier about, do you teach this sort of stuff in your classroom? And my answer would have been, it depends. Because the price can be quite high if you need to have good student references, and that's well documented, that it's more costly for women and minorities to teach subjects that have to do with social justice than it is for majorities. So it depends. But I think it's okay to have a small group, and that's really what women's colleges were all about. It was about building the confidence and the skills of an insider group. I think what my druthers would be had to do something with a comment that you made, Joss, about how insulated architects are from other outside influences, and that it's not that we're not talking to a larger body of architects, but we're not talking to other people, and the other people that we want to know about and that we want to be invested in. So those are the people that I wish were here. Yeah. More urban planners, more other fields, and more other disciplines. I think that's what would make a richer insider discussion. Getting more voices in the choir instead of making a bigger choir.
And it's been really interesting doing a lot of co-design of educational projects with disabled artists working with educators. That's usually been with enthusiasts, and we've often been able to spread it more widely. But when it gets to things like those artists being involved in assessment, everybody gets really, really anxious. And you're like, why are you getting anxious? Why can't you have a voice outside of the profession, but that's very creative and knowledgeable about what might be a good project? How can you kind of cut the line? So that sense of how the profession gets policed about who gets to come in, and if you do a community project, then the extent to which those people have a real say in that aspect of the outcome, for example, is still very fragile, I think. Yeah. So it shows the fragility of the profession, actually. It's really scared to let people in architecture, I think.
Scared to let people be themselves too.
Yeah. And almost, from my experience, unsure about how to even engage and how to, ask the questions, talk to people outside in a meaningful, appropriate, equitable, kind of fair way where it is a reciprocal sort of relationship, or even, one step beyond where you are really just listening. And that touches on what Sharon was talking about yesterday with young people. And it's not just always about asking, or disabled people as well. It's not just about asking, how do you want this? But it's actually like, how do you engage meaningfully so that you can use that information in a more productive manner? I think we have this role within profession as well, from what I understand, that we need to learn how to facilitate those conversations better and embed that within our processes, I think.
I agree. I think listening is a really powerful skill that everyone should embrace, because that's what about sharing stories is, and that's how you gain knowledge, and then that's how knowledge becomes power, and then, as a collective, we're uplifted and see change.
So do we know the geographic representation in the room?
This wide. Lots of. Who's from Melbourne? Who's not from Melbourne? Let's just do it that way. Who's not from Australia? It's getting smaller.
Yeah.
Who's from North America? Who's from the UK? Who's not from any of those places and not Australia? See, it gets really tiny.
Yeah.
Who's from a regional location? Oh.
Well, I think that's a real strength, even though the numbers were smaller, that the geographic spread was really quite good. And that makes me think that we should have more opportunities for small group discussions, because I don't think we should be finding that out at the end. Right? Because, something you said about a disability and about misfit and fit is if you're a misfit, you have to pay more attention. And I have really noticed, especially last night at dinner, how much I have to pay attention because I'm one of the misfits. I'm from someplace else. And people are speaking in a way. There was a certain point I had to give the phone to Sarah because I couldn't understand the person who was speaking to me in English on the telephone. What are you saying?
I don't think it was about 500 decibels in there too, so that wasn't helping.
But no, I think the whole idea that a benefit is our varied experience of the world, and that if we want to, build this choir with the other voices, that geographic difference is one of the things that is a great benefit of this group.
I have to agree with you, Sharon, with the smaller group session that we had at lunchtime. I thought was brilliant. I was in the small practice group, and I asked those that were with me why they started their own small practice, and I got three or four completely different answers, which was really revealing, because in my own mind I had an idea that it was all going to be planned, and you made your decision on you wanting to start your own practice based on where you wanted to go. But it actually wasn't that. It was all organic, and everyone was from a different part of Australia and some international. So I really enjoyed that parlour session today. I don't know about you, Ekta. Which one were you in?
I actually didn't attend. I went for a kind of nosy around the school during lunchtime, which I
I've got to do that.
Really interesting as well. So I went on a little tiki tour of my own. And that in itself was a learning experience that I'm excited to take home with me and share some ideas about what I've seen in this brilliant school. But leading on from that small group discussion, we had a pretty good spread in the room. I don't know what the standard normally is in these situations, but it looked like a good spread to me geographically. And that in itself is so powerful. We all get to go back and start those conversations at a local level. at a contextual level that, again, can have some wider application. I'm so excited to go back to my school and start these discussions and get people engaged and show everyone. I've got the Matrix book sitting on my bedside table, and I'm so excited to bring it in and be like, look, we have this in the library. Let's all, open these books that are not taught to us as standard curriculum. It's we now all can move this conversation forward in our own networks.
So does anybody else have an action that they are going to take when they go home?
Sort of hands sort of flash maybe in the middle there. Here comes some... Yeah, it's hard to hear.
We can't hear you.
Sorry. We're going to keep talking to Ben around getting a group in Sydney around mental well-being in practice and architecture, so we can build on that and try and expand that little movement if we can.
Can I just say, I feel terrible about this because I think the work Ben's doing is absolutely fab, but I would really love the sense that it was part of because it's like mental health is something, or mental well-being is something which is it's just like, it is definitely stigmatized, but it's kind of just sliding sideways on normality, and it is about a notion that it can be cured. And I guess I'm really interested in how one might think about that really wide range of the fact that we really don't have people with disabilities, or that there'll be lots of people with hidden disabilities, but as I say, they hide them. They pass, is the expression, within disability. They pass as normal. And if you've got a really visible disability, well, I don't know, there must be, I'm sure people do know people in their offices, but it's tiny percentage. It's something like 1% disclosed within architecture in the RIBA. Doesn't represent the real numbers. So I'm trying to say, and it's not about Ben and what he's doing, but it is about thinking whether there's a version of that which really does think about the wide variety of bodies, the way that people manage. Because I now know so many people who are managing and doing good jobs, but they're having to manage complex impairments as part of that job, which go way beyond health. Mental health. There may be diabetes, there may be partial sightedness, maybe deafness. And for me, there's I kind of get worried when, Ben is not doing this, I don't want to, if we just jump on the mental well-being bandwagon, we're reproducing a way of thinking about bodies which kind of makes it kind of acceptable, and we're missing a whole set of possible tricks about. Because until architecture as a practice has a much wider range of people who explicitly show themselves and feel safe to show themselves as having different ways of being in the world, then we're going to go on, reproducing a particular kind of quite limited culture, I think. So it's not, you might want to respond to that. I'm sorry.
Now, I could see hands everywhere. No. Ryan, there was the woman who just handed you the one.
Does anyone want to respond to that one?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You can have mine.
So I completely get that, and I think that's completely valid. What I would say is I don't think that the two are in direct conflict. But what I would say is it's not even about curing mental health problems. It's, for me, I think unfortunately we work in an industry, the way that it's geared at the moment is actually causing mental health problems, I believe. And so actually if we can change the culture and the way that we work to, if we were working in an industry that was causing physical disabilities to someone, we would change that very, very quickly. And so if it's causing a psychological or mental disability to somebody, I think we absolutely have a responsibility to address that.
Yeah, I completely agree, but I just think it's just missing a trick. It's just really interesting how we might use it as a way of expanding. That's all. Not.
Hi, I really value, I guess I think and talk out loud at the same time, so bear with me. But I really value everything that's kind of been said across the board. So there is no, I don't sit in one, I don't have allegiance in one kind of camp over the other. So particularly value the mental wellbeing focus. In my mind, that is actually a form of disability, and agree that it falls under an umbrella of many other areas of, that fall under the disability, the banner of disability, and the focus isn't on cure, but mental health is something that is managed. But that's just a comment, I guess, to make in support of that. But I think on the topic of disability,
action on
inclusion,
equity.
action, yep. No, I'll get there. I think it's really interesting. There was a really interesting point in your talk, Joss, where you mentioned that we're trained to not, well, there's kind of this aversion to staying with the difficulty. And a very quick personal note is, I have a extremely adorable young nephew who has cerebral palsy, and I can see that even as a family, as a culture, as a society, the desire to want to take away that challenge and that pain for him, to make it easier for him, actually further disables him. So that's been part of my education process, and I'm just giving that background. I think for me, a big focus on where next, what we need to do as a profession is have these conversations, yes, have this awareness, but what do we... How do we actually motivate people at an emotive level to understand what it's like and what the implications are for people who aren't able-bodied or of a normative body? And so just go with me for the ride, and I know it's the end of the day, but as part of having studied architecture as well, I did a primary teaching degree, and a very simple exercise there was a unit in there which was inclusion, and there was a really simple exercise that we did there, which was simply it was focusing on language, and it was looking at, rather than using the term which you talked about, the blind architect, for example, it's saying the architect who is blind. And the exercise was going through, and there was a series of questions, and having to reframe a series of sentences to help reframe my own mind and thinking. And so the reason I'm saying all of this is, as architects, interior designers, and I think all the other kind of disciplines that kind of correlate and correspond, I don't think it needs to be a full-on big course that necessarily, focuses on everything. A simple exercise like that actually sparked a light in my mind, and I understood something just in doing that activity. So part of the actions for me, I think, as a profession, is educating on a consistent and regular basis. It's kind of basically putting someone in a position where they can understand it. It's giving them practical examples and skills. It's not kind of talking about it in this forum, but it's like having someone embody an experience so that they personally understand what that is like. And I don't know what the answer is, but I think, part of it is kind of in architectural kind of courses, but then how do you kind of take that to have professionals who have been practicing understand that as well. But I think it really is about how do you kind of have someone understand that from a personal level so that they understand it, value it, and then want to enact change. I don't know what your answer and responses are to that.
I think what's interesting always for me, and it relates to gender too, which is if you just flip things around and you see whether assumptions you've made about something work. Like if you flip, if you read something that's written about a male architect and you make it female like in a newspaper, you'll see there's a language used which is never really used around women, and vice versa. If you take the obituary of Denise Scott Brown, or you'll see that the way that stuff's written is it's very gendered language, and there's a similar thing around disability. But with disability, I think we often say things about how we might come to understand it that we wouldn't say around how you'd understand what it's like to be female. It's a weird thing. Do we ever say, oh, well, I'll just begin, if you tell me about what it's like to be female, I'll understand how to be female. I just think we have to be quite careful. And the kind of person-first language, for example, we did a MOOC. I don't know how many people know what a MOOC is, but when I was at UNSW, we did a MOOC, which is an online learning package about disability. We did 2 about disability. And because it was completely international, we both had to flip round saying persons with disability, which is what you say here, and disabled people, which is what we say in the UK. And we then had to have a little explanation about why we'd done that. And I quite like to get to the place where we're not so caught up in naming things. It's that we're not dealing with the actual thing, and it happens too. There are trends around how you might talk about people of colour, women of colour, how those trends change. There's a whole set of things about people resisting the word Latinx, for example. There's these things are argued over, but I don't think they're the actual problem.
I guess I'm using that as an example, not that that's the solution, but I'm using that as an example to say that was something that I had to, as part of my education in the primary teaching course, was that I had to actually engage in something. It wasn't just a case of the tutor sitting there and telling me, do this, this is how it is. I'm just hearing the information and processing it. It's not about the person first. It's not me saying that's the way forward. I'm just saying that actual engagement and that practical exercise created something within myself. And I'm just saying, as part of our education, I feel like the way forward is more of that, is the actual engagement. Yeah.
I agree, and that's the whole point of bringing disabled art.
That was the bottom line to that whole story.
It's just about bringing disabled art. That's what we do. We bring disabled artists into.
So thank you. We've got other questions because we really only have time for one more question, and I can see it over here.
Hi, Monica Edwards. I'm on the Gender Equity Task Force New South Wales, and our action, which we already had before this event, was a celebration of queer around February, March next year. And I just want to say, if anyone wants to help us with that, get in contact. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Do we have time to have a couple more people yell out their actions?
Yeah.
It's action.
Well, if it is actions, yes, but we really are coming up against things.
I have an action that I want to put out towards people is just from over the past 2 days, I think a common thread between all of the talks and discussions has been empathy. And being understanding, whether that is flexible hours, whether that is if you're trans, non-binary, whether that is you're disabled, all to do with the built environment and moving forward. So I guess a personal action that I'm going to take for equity is to be more understanding and listen more and share the stories that other people have told me. But yeah, I just put that towards everyone else because I think that's been a really strong thread through the Parlour series over the past 2 days.
And maybe that empathy can come through that level of engagement with something that you are unfamiliar with or a concept, and you can engage and gain that empathy and then move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I guess another thing that was really common was policy. That came up quite a bit, and I guess before you can really create the policy, it seems you need to have a really strong understanding of others, not just your own individual experience. So that's what I've taken away from the past 2 days.
Perfect.
So I'm going to take that point of enthusiasm, engagement, excitement as the end point of the symposium. There are a number of people I need to thank. I'd like to thank particularly our 2 wonderful keynote speakers who've come a long way and have been so inspiring. So Joss and Sharon, thank you. I'd like to thank Georgie and Ekta as our young enthusiasts who are going to... I can't thank every speaker and every person who's chaired, but believe me, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. It's been incredibly inspiring. I've learnt an enormous amount over the last 2 days and go away with renewed passion for the whole realm of equity and a lot of work in front of me. I do want to call out just a couple of people who've been very instrumental in helping with the symposium. Anna Hurleman, who's sitting here in the front, has been an absolute stalwart, so thank you. The team at JT Productions, who are actually, around, they're the ones all in black who hand you the microphone immediately, who come across like a little whirlwind and clear the stage, have been marshalling, have been absolutely terrific. I can see them all standing up there. Thank you very much. There's the events team here at ABP, including Rhys Quilford. This is actually his last day with us. He's stayed on to do the Symposium, Sophie Hill, Sarah Brocklesby, and a whole series of other people who've helped over the few days. Thank you. And I am saving one person till last, and I'm going to make her stand up. Justine Clark, please stand. As so many of you would know, Justine is the absolute driving force behind Parlour. Now, I have lots of other Parlour colleagues in the room, but without Justine, I'm not quite sure that Parlour exists in quite the fabulous way that it does. And she has been absolutely instrumental in making these 2 days happen. It's her connections and networks, enthusiasm and capacity to connect to people who's made it all possible. So thank you, Justine. And now the very last thing is to, as a way of saying goodbye, please join us for drinks and the last of the conversation about all the things that have been going on. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I've got one more. So this is a huge amount of work, as you know, and Parlour on the whole is a huge amount of work, and we can only do it because we're supported by people. So Melbourne University, of course, has been a significant supporter of this event. They have put a huge amount of finance and goodwill into this event. It would not be possible without that, and I've had people from all over Australia saying, oh, can we have one? I'm like, if you can find a university to give this much money, sure. But Melbourne Uni has also been a partner of Parlour since the very beginning. They are also one of our ongoing sponsors. They are one of our top line ongoing sponsors, but we also have support from quite a few other universities and also from a number of industry organisations. And Alistair from AWS is here. And AWS really make our whole event program possible. This is a bit separate to that, but really it's absolutely significant. Brickworks, BEC. So I just want to, and also all the people who donate to us. We can't do this if you guys don't support us, and I really, really appreciate that we do have so much support from everybody, and also Paul.